Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of
Oodles of Brutals.
I know I'm looking particularly brutal in my fucking orange Smashing Pumpkins shirt, but what are you gonna do? A man can't live by metal alone.
Or can they?
Anyways, guys, we are halfway through the Groove Metal Meltdown, counting down my top 20 groove metal albums. This is part 3, so after this we'll be getting close to being done with this series. I'm sure many of you will be happy about that. If you haven't watched the first 2 videos, please stop this one, go back and watch the first 2 so you're all up to speed on where we're at with the countdown. Without any further ado, guys, let's get right into it. Up first, coming in at number 11, we've got White Zombie, La Sexorcisto, Devil Music, Volume 1. Man, that is a mouthful. I love this album so much. I obviously, like many people in my generation, were exposed to White Zombie through the video for Thunder Kiss 65, and when I got this album in my hot little hands, I listened to that song, I don't know, a million fucking times before I probably played the whole album, and I subsequently fell in love with the entire thing. This album is great front to back. It was released on Geffen in 1992 and produced by Andy Wallace, who also worked with Slayer, Sepultura, and Rollins Band, to name but a few. Several of my favorite bands right there. White Zombie, they had this really interesting trajectory. They kind of started in the New York's underground noise rock scene and sort of evolved into this groove metal behemoth that they became known as once they got signed to a major label and got some big time exposure. And I think it's an interesting evolution. It's a great evolution because this is one kick-ass groove metal album right here. You've got great production. You've got a cameo from Iggy Pop on Black Sunshine. This is just a tremendous fucking album. One of my favorite albums of all time, and very important album for me as far as my formative years of getting into metal. This was one of the first albums I really became obsessed with. I mean, it was just everything I loved. B-movies, awesome guitar riffs, crazy vocals, everything I loved kind of came into play on this album here, and of course I just became obsessed with it. Still spin it very often to this very day. This is one of my all-time favorites. It is, of course, the immortal White Zombie with La Sexorcisto, Devil Music, Volume 1. Up next, kind of a new record, Decapitated Anticult. This was released on Nuclear Blast in 2017. Of course, Decapitated hails from Poland. They released their first album, Winds of Creation, when they were teenagers. Unfortunately, when they were touring for the album Organic Hallucinosis, they were involved in a horrible bus accident. Killed one member, permanently injured another member. All that was left of the lineup at that point was Vogue. He soldiered on with the band. They came back with Carnival is Forever and changed their sound pretty drastically, evolving away from traditional death metal into more of a groove metal / gent / death metal hybrid. This album is almost full-on groove metal with still some death metal elements. A lot of people don't like this album. I think it's fucking fantastic. I think it's an interesting evolution. It's definitely not as technical or as savage or as vicious as their earlier stuff, but it is a cool, catchy sounding album. Still plenty heavy, still got some great riffs in it, excellent vocals. With the album after this one, Cancer Culture, they went back to a little more of a death metal sound, but still with some groove elements mixed in. But this is the pinnacle of their groove metal phase. We'll see where it goes from here, but Decapitated Anticult. This one kicks a ton of ass. Again, a lot of people I know don't like this one. A lot of people probably haven't heard it. Once again, that's Decapitated Anticult. Taking it back to another classic from NYC, and coming in at lucky number 13, we've got Helmet, Meantime. This was released on Interscope in 1992. And you know what? 1992 was a hell of a year for music. Obviously we just talked about La Sexorcisto from White Zombie, and then we had Helmet, Meantime, another kick-ass groove metal album, but totally different sounding from White Zombie. So again, I ask, is groove metal really a genre, or is it just something that journalists made up to lump together a bunch of bands that don't really sound that much alike? Whatever the case, what's always struck me about Meantime is just how tight sounding Helmet are on this album. It's just like they totally just lock in together like fucking Voltron, man. This album kicks so much fucking ass. I can't even get over it. Still to this day, I spin it constantly. It's got so many great songs on it. Of course, everybody knows Unsung, which was the big single from this album, but it's just front to back amazing. This was engineered by Wharton Tears, but Andy Wallace strikes again. He did the mixing work on this album, so obviously, you know, he was involved in, again, Los Exorcisto, and now he's coming back at you for Helmet. Page Hamilton is a great fucking guitarist. I believe, if I remember correctly, he played guitar in Glenn Branca's Guitar Orchestra, if you guys are familiar with that at all. So once again, kind of coming out of the more experimental scene of NYC, but rapidly evolving into the groove metal juggernaut that was Helmet back then. Unfortunately, they're not what they used to be, let's be honest, but Helmet released several classic albums, Strap It On and Betty, and of course Meantime. This album just means a lot to me, guys. I spun it constantly as a teenager, and I still to this day I spin it on the regular because it's just so goddamn good. It's just concise, it's compact, it's tightly wound. The band sounds fucking amazing. You know, there's bands you like, and then there's certain bands you listen to and you just go,
good goddamn, that is a great fucking band.
And for me, Helmet has always been one of those bands. Well, I should say this era of Helmet in particular, but yeah. Helmet, Meantime, stone cold classic right here. If you have not heard this album, we cannot be friends. Up next, my friends, we have Marauder, Master Killer. Now, you may notice that this is actually the Master Killer's anthology. This contains most of Marauder's discography, including the Master Killer album, which was their debut. And what a goddamn debut it was. Just a total... You know, most people would say it's metalcore. I say it still falls under the groove metal subgenre in addition to metalcore. It's just a killer mashup of like Slayer and hardcore with just a killer groove. Kind of one of the progenitors of that metalcore sound, that metallic hardcore sound, if you will, that came to be so popular later on. What's also interesting about this album is that it was produced by Paris Mayhew of Cro-Mags, one of the pioneers of that sound with great albums like Best Wishes. I mean, you guys have heard Cro-Mags by now, for God's sake. If you haven't, just stop this goddamn video and go listen to some Cro-Mags. But we're here to talk about Marauder, and yeah, they came out of the gate just roaring and screaming with Master Killer. And just that was just the start of a phenomenal career for these guys. This is another band that I felt like never got their due. Yeah, this has most of their material on it, including the classic Master Killer album. I just happened to luckily find it a few years ago and had to snap it up the minute I saw it. Yeah, classic metalcore album, or metallic hardcore, whatever you want to call it. I still say it falls under the groove metal subheading as well. That's Marauder, Master Killer. Coming in last for this episode, but certainly not least, we have another one of my all-time favorite albums. This is Sepultura, Chaos AD. This was released on Roadrunner Records in 1993. Andy Wallace strikes again, that motherfucker. I love this album so much. A lot of people don't like this album, and I get it. You know, Sepultura stepped away from their classic death thrash sound to pursue a groove metal sound on Chaos AD, which they would take even further by combining with nu metal on Roots, which is another awesome album that a lot of people don't like because they're fucking stupid. But whatever. But in all seriousness, Chaos AD, one of my favorite all-time albums. It's got so much groove, but it's still got some of that heaviness and aggression that comes from their death thrash background. I've said this in previous videos, guys. There's just something about the Brazilian scene in particular. Bands coming out of there are just so aggressive and so savage sounding. And Sepultura, even though they changed sounds on this, they never lost that aspect of their sound. And it comes through on Refuse, Resist, on Territory, on Biotech as Godzilla. So many fucking awesome songs on this album. Again, this is another one that just kicks ass front to back. The Cavalera brothers knew what the fuck they were doing. Andreas Kisser is an amazing lead guitarist. Sepultura, unfortunately, is calling it quits this year. I never got to see them live because COVID fucked me out of it.
Fuck you, COVID-19.
But anyway, Sepultura, Chaos AD, a fucking goddamn classic. One of the best albums that Roadrunner ever released, in my opinion, and that's saying a lot considering all the classic death metal and shit they put out. Well, guys, that wraps it up for this episode of the Groove Metal Meltdown. We are almost done. There's only one episode left to go. Be sure to like and subscribe, as the kids say. Until next time, guys, thanks for watching and take care. Peace.
Whatever the case,